And welcome, my friend, to yet another episode here, the Red Delta Project podcast and live feed Q&A, helping you escape the diet and exercise rat race by taking a fundamental approach to fitness that's based on the principles of modern human nature. I'm Matt Schifferly, happy to have you on board here. And today's episode, we're talking about common yet obvious telltale signs that the workout routine that you're following isn't going to work out in your favor. It's basically crap. And this is something that I see a lot of people ignore time after time after time, especially when someone comes to me sometimes through my Instagram DMs or emails me and stuff. And they're like, is my workout routine any good? Is this going to be helpful for helping me build muscle or burn fat or what have you? And the fact of the matter is that when it comes to you getting the results that you want, a good routine really doesn't do a whole heck of a lot. But what it does do is absolutely vital to your success. And I always use the analogy, it's like a launch pad for a rocket. Okay, imagine your goal to get the results you want is like launching a rocket into space. And your body is that rocket, right? And your routine is the launch pad that the rocket is sitting on. If you're not really sure what I'm talking about in relative to the engineering of it, you can Google, launch pad for rockets and stuff like that, because really a launch pad is essential for getting the rocket up into space, but it doesn't actually get the rocket up into orbit. The launch pad does not get the rocket where it needs to go. Similarly, your routine does not get you the results that you want. And I'm going to say that again to make it very clear. Your ability to build muscle, your ability to burn fat, your ability to improve your golf swing, whatever you're trying to do, that does not come from your workout routine or your training plan. That's not what it's responsible for. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see people making is thinking that's the case. And they feel like, oh, if I'm not getting the results that I want, then my routine must not be very good. And so you end up program hopping and you end up tweaking and trying to adjust 100 things. Like, what if I did 5x5, or what if I did 7x3 or 4x6, and all these different parameters. And to a large degree, most of these adjustments and changes in our workout routines is just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. It's just making changes for change's sake, kind of pulling the proverbial lever on the slot machine, hoping with blind luck, like, come on, big money, big money, big money. Please give me a routine that somehow through sheer luck is going to get me what I want. When in reality, all you need to do from a good routine is two things. That's it. If you've got these two things handled, then your routine is literally as good as it is ever going to be. It's never going to improve no matter how many ways you try to change it. Now, we can always tweak it. We can always adjust it a little bit in order to make it a little bit more effective, especially for our ever-changing circumstances. But at the end of the day, your routine is not responsible for your results. Okay, so let me give you an analogy here. As a martial artist, right, I can make up a routine where I say I'm going to do 100 side kicks every single day. That's my routine. In fact, I'll make it a little more detailed. I'm going to do 50 side kicks in the morning and 50 side kicks in the afternoon or the evening. Okay? Now, with that routine in place, will that make my side kick better? No way to possibly know. Absolutely nothing about that has any relevance whatsoever to my ability to do better side kicks. Why? Because all it is a plan that structures my training. That's all it is. That's all the plan does. And that's all it's supposed to do. It's not supposed to make me better at doing side kicks. What will make me better at doing side kicks is me literally trying to do better side kicks. Doing my kick and saying, okay, I got to chamber my knee more. I got to roll my hip over a little bit more. I'm holding my breath and I'm exhausting myself too quickly. That's the stuff that's going to make me a better martial artist. And that's exactly the same thing that happens with you and your routine. Your ability to build muscle and burn calories and get a better muscle up and all these things that you're looking for is not going to come from how you structure a routine. It comes from how well you do your push-ups, how well you're executing the exercises that you're doing. That's what's responsible for your results. And if your execution of the techniques isn't very good and you're not looking to improve it or have some sort of a approach where you're trying to do something better, then it doesn't really matter what kind of routine that you ever follow. Because the only thing that routine does, like that launch pad for the rocket, is it keeps you pointed in the right direction and it gives you some stability. That's it. That is all your routine will ever do for you. So if you have stability, meaning that you can regularly and consistently apply your training, and you're pointed in the rough general direction you want to go, which means that things are in alignment for your goals, that's usually fairly obvious, right? If you're doing bicep curls with 5-pound dumbbells, and you can do 1,000 of them, and you're like, yeah, but I want my biceps to get much stronger. Well, of course, that's not in alignment with your goals because you're using such light weight, light resistance. You're doing 1,000 of them. How hard could your biceps possibly be working if you could do 1,000 repetitions, right? Of course, you would burn out. You would really 1,000 reps would eventually feel hard enough, but you could do that curling a pencil. So that's all your routine needs to be. It gives you stability and it gives you direction. That's it. That's all you can ever hope from your routine. And if you've got that, you literally have everything your routine could possibly give you. And then it's just tweaking things from there. And so a lot of these warning signs that your routine actually sucks is compromising that stability and is no longer pointing you in the right direction. Let's see if we can't get to some questions here. My eyes are a little on the blurry side today. I'm gonna get my spectacles on here. People coming on in. Good to see everybody. Happy New Year all over the place. Dan also getting the party started, saying, hey, Matt, another great video the other day about isometrics. Thank you. Yes, I did a great video. I've been trying to make that video for a very long time, actually. Couldn't quite get it right about how to improve your isometric training to build more muscle. But if I do a dynamic set that takes 30 seconds and an isometric set for 30 seconds, wouldn't the isometrics be more productive with the quote constant tension? And I love where you're going with this here, Dan. Very, very smart question. Because yes, because remember, fundamentally, your muscles don't know the difference between different types of training. They don't know if you're lifting a free weight or a machine. And to a very large degree, they don't even know the difference between isometrics and dynamic exercise. They know time and they know tension. That's it. And as you rightfully have observed, that if you do repetitions for 30 seconds, your muscles don't know how many reps you did. Muscles can't count reps. It doesn't know if you did 10 reps or 20 reps or whatever. All it knows is you needed to produce a certain amount of tension in the muscle for 30 seconds of time. So if you're doing the isometric versus the dynamic, your muscles theoretically are saying, I'm doing basically the same thing. Now, is it exactly the same thing? No, of course not. Because with the isometrics, as you, again, smartly have pointed out, you have constant tension. When we do dynamic exercise, the amount of resistance on the muscle and the tension in the muscle ebbs and flows. It goes up and down. It goes up when we lift the weight on the concentric phase of the repetition, and it decreases as we lower the weight, or the resistance decreases on the eccentric phase. So with isometrics, that's one of the great things about it, is that tension remains pretty high and constant throughout. That's one of the reasons why a lot of times when people start with an isometric exercise and they've never done that before, they're absolutely blown away by how difficult it is, because they're used to their muscles working hard and relaxing a little and working hard and relaxing a little bit versus just constantly on. It's kind of like if you had a really hot stove or something and you put your hand on it for a second and take it away. Put your hand on a second, take it away. And it's like my hand's getting warm and eventually it burns. But with an isometric, that's just taking your hand, putting it on the stove and just pressing it in and just really cooking, whatever you're cooking on that. So yes, absolutely. It would be different because of that. But we also have to consider other things that are different that dynamic exercise may bring to us as well. With dynamic exercise, there may be other associated changes from pushing the muscle to a high degree of capacity. And this is still a lot we still don't understand about building muscle and how we trigger hypertrophy and stuff like that. But I'm not about to suggest that being able to contract the muscle isometrically alone is the altogether best way for building muscle and strength. I think there's still something about dynamic movement that still is very beneficial. There's changing the ability to go from concentric to eccentric, which I think has some value to it. And then we have to also look at muscle damage. And this is a little of a funky thing, because in many ways, we may look at muscle damage as being either a blessing or a curse. Because with dynamic exercise, we're going to have more muscle damage. It's just the nature of the beast, and popping sarcomeres and everything in the muscles and stuff. And you're not going to have nearly as much damage when it comes to isometrics most of the time. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? That remains to be seen, because in some ways, muscle damage is still correlated to hypertrophy response. But at the same time, we also look at hypertrophy and say, yeah, but there's tons of ways that we can damage muscles and it doesn't grow one bit. So we're still on the fence about this. But the bottom line is that we're looking at here is, are they different, the dynamic and the isometric, for 30 seconds? Yes. How is it different? Does it matter? I'm not sure as of yet. I'm not about to say that they're exactly the same. There's still going to be difference. Does it really matter? I think that remains to be seen. But your mindset is totally on the right track of thinking of just the time and the tension. Fantastic questions. Fantastic. All right, Zaid is coming on speaking about our workout routines. Hey, Matt, I wanted to focus more on building muscle from training for front lever and other skills. Okay, pull-ups and rows for pull, deep push-ups for push. Yep. Close squats, split squats for legs. Thoughts? Okay, so focus more on building muscle from training. Okay, so right off the bat, I'm looking at, you've got two different goals here. You've got building muscle, and then you've also got the goal of front lever and other calisthenic skills. So one of the things that I often recommend from people is that calisthenic skills, awesome, great, wonderful, good. But don't think that you're going to get jacked from calisthenic skills, or that if you get really big, strong muscles, you're going to be able to do these skills. Now, sometimes, yes, there is going to be a correlation between the two of them. Absolutely. But I usually tell people, if you want to build muscle, focus on building muscle. If you want skills, focus on improving your skills. Treat them as separate things. They're not quite one and the same. Because it's certainly possible. You see this all over the social medias of people who have amazing skill in the calisthenics world, and they have pretty average looking bodies. And that's just not calisthenics, that's just everything. There are plenty of average looking dudes out there who are really, really strong and capable. Why? Because they're focusing on doing the thing. Versus if we want to focus on hypertrophy, we want to focus on progressively working the muscle harder, bringing it to a high degree of fatigue within our training. And for that, usually skills are a pretty poor choice for doing that. It's really hard to push your back muscles hard enough to stimulate a good degree of hypertrophy with something that you're struggling to do, like a front lever and stuff. But if it's something that is technically easier, like rows and stuff, that's going to probably be a better choice for you. So the thing I always look at with stuff like this is you've got your pull-ups, your rows for pull, push-in, close squats, things like that. But always remember, you've got to understand how to increase your resistance with these exercises. So make sure you understand progressive calisthenics theory. That's why I wrote the book, Progressive and Weighted Calisthenics. Anybody who ever wants to build muscle and strength with bodyweight training has to know this information. Okay, full stop. You don't have to get it from this book. I'm not trying to just sell you and say you have to buy my book. You don't have to, but you do have to know how to apply with progressive calisthenics theory. That is an absolute essential. That'd be, without that, that's like walking into a gym that only has an empty barbell. And that's all they've got is empty barbells. And people are like, well, where do we go with this? What do we do with this? It's like, well, you don't go anywhere. That's where you go. And most people don't go very far with calisthenics training because they don't understand that stuff. So I'm assuming you know that, but I just want to make sure we cover that base. So you got your push, your pull, your squat. Very good. I would also still add in something for your extension chain, particularly your hip extension, hip bridges, things like that. Don't neglect your hamstrings and your extension, not just because it's good for building up the glutes and the hamstrings and things like that, but your extension chain, particularly the stability in your back, is essential for almost every exercise you ever do in your training. And if your back stability, your extension chain ability is lacking, it's going to compromise everything you ever do. So those are the only things that I would add in from at that point. My buddy Dave is coming on. Dave, it's good to see you. Hey, Matt. Glad I caught this one live. Same here, my friend. Just want to say thanks for all you do. Hope you have a great 2024. Any update on the adaptive training book timeline? Good question. Yes, I just pulled it out the other day, as a matter of fact. I was sidetracked from writing that because I'm writing that. I'm also writing another book adjacent to that. And the other day I realized, man, I haven't been working on my adaptive training manual in like a month. I'm like, oh, that can't be that's not right kind of thing. So I've just pulled it out and I plan on working on that quite a bit more over the next week. I am hoping, fingers crossed, to get it out by my birthday, which is in the beginning of February. So actually, what is today? Today is the 6th. So it's February 9th. So just over a month, my friend. And that's going to be a good quick read that will be coming down the pipe. I'll let you guys know when that is about to hit. Okay, so here we go with a couple of routine questions and stuff like that. Hey, Matt, what do you think about training to failure? I need to make an updated video on this because I get a lot of questions on this one sort of thing. First and foremost, I firmly, truly, honestly believe that most people never go to failure. They just don't have it in them. Going to like muscular failure is extremely hard, very taxing. 9 times out of 10 for the average individual, it's going to be a failure of something else. So that's always the first question to ask is failure of what? What is failing? What is the limiting factor? Because every time we do an exercise, we have lots of different variables contributing to our ability to do the exercise. And a lot of times we're hitting a limit that's not muscular. It's mental, it's emotional, it's cardio, it's technical, it's stability. You know, if you're doing pistol squats and you're just starting to wobble all over the place, you're hitting a failure of stability. So bottom line, when it comes to failure, I always tell people, yeah, just push yourself. Just go. Just keep going. You keep going, just keep going. You know, there's a lot of fear mongering out there in our fitness culture about, you know, oh, don't push too hard. You got to save a rep. Don't go. And the other thing too is many people in my experience are very poor judges of how hard and far they can actually push themselves. Unless you got a pretty good amount of experience, athletes typically have a better understanding of that as well. But gosh, the number of times I've worked with clients and they'll straight up tell me with a straight face and they'll say, that was my absolute limit. I'm like, you weren't even close. You weren't even close to your limit. You weren't even slowing down. That was not your limit. Because we humans are usually very poor judges of our true limits. So this is why I usually tell people, don't worry about failure. Don't worry about can you go to it. Don't worry about am I going to it. Just push more, okay? Keep going because your ability to get the results depends on progression over time. Depends on improving over time. I don't care if you're hitting failure every time. There are loads of guys. I used to be that guy who was like, I always push to failure and it never did me any good. Why? Because I was always doing the same weight and the same number of repetitions. I had no progression in my training. It doesn't matter if you're going to failure or not. Keep in mind, though, that when it comes to going to a very high state of fatigue, the more you push that fatigue, the less energy you're going to have for subsequent sets. So that's a strategy to employ in your training, depending on how you're going about it. Now, when grind style calisthenics, you know, another shameless book plug, right? The 4 phases of grind style calisthenics, when we're in the strength phase or the proficiency phase of our workouts, I tell people, I don't want you pushing that hard into the fatigue zone. I don't want you going to failure. Why? Because I don't want you doing 2 sets and burning out. We're practicing proficiency. And it's really hard to practice something when you're exhausted and getting better at it. So that's why the strength and proficiency phases save a little in the tank. Go to like 80%-ish or so, right? Because you want to get those sets in. You want to build up the reps. But then when you start getting fatigued and you're like, okay, I'm starting to circle the drain here a little bit, then you go into your hypertrophy phase. And at that point, I'm like, just blast the mother living hell out of the muscles. Go until you're peeling yourself off the floor. And then you only need to do it like once or twice because then you're going to be pretty smoked. So this is some of the routine programming that we talk about with an objective approach, which is based on the fundamental principles of modern human nature with the grind style method. Okay. Now, do you have to have that in your routine? This is one of the things I wanted to really drive home in today's episode, is that a lot of times people will look at a workout routine like they're trying to rocket science their results. Like, in order for me to build muscle or burn fat or whatever, I got to get my routine just right. I got to get the details perfect, and I've got to get everything dialed into the. No, you don't. No, you don't. Blast the mother living hell out of the muscles. That's basically all you really need to do. Work them hard as far as intensity. So make sure you got a good amount of resistance, and push them to a good degree of fatigue at some point in your routine. Okay. At some point in your workout. You can pace yourself like we do in grind style, so we get more practice. You could just set a timer and be like, I'm just going to blast pull-ups for 3 minutes because that's all I've got, like in my micro workouts, right? You don't need to, quote, science the shit out of your routine in order to make it effective. Because again, all your routine needs to do is have some stability and point you in the right direction, which is why the first thing that's a telltale sign that your routine sucks is you just simply have trouble sticking to it. Can you do it with relative ease? I'm not talking about, oh, I've got the routine, but I can stick to it as long as I always get plenty of sleep and my diet's on point and I'm not working overtime, and my boss isn't riding my ass and the kids aren't fighting and everything in my life is perfect, then I can stick to the routine. No, your routine has to survive with reality, with real life. The kids are sick. I have to work overtime. I'm tired and exhausted, and the gym is closed, and all these other things are coming. Good. Can you still do it? That's the marker of a good routine. How easily can you stick to it? How easily can you continue to implement it? And the easier it is for you to stick to it, the better your routine will be. The harder it is for you to stick to it, and you find yourself like, oh man, I can stick to it for a couple of weeks, but then I go off the rails and I'm on again and off again and on again and off again and on. And no, that's not a good routine. That's not a good plan for you. I'm sorry. It doesn't matter who wrote it up. You could have, the god of exercise and fitness make up this routine for you. But if you're having trouble sticking to it, it's not a good routine, because that's the first thing we have to have. We have to have that stability. A launch pad sucks as a launch pad if the rocket keeps falling over. If it doesn't give it that stability to keep it pointed in the right direction. And it's the exact same thing with your routine. I don't care if your routine is 2 hours long or 2 minutes long. If you do it every day or once a week, just be able to stick to it. And if you can't, then we got to make some changes. You got to make some adjustments. Let's get to some more good questions here. My buddy Michael, Drop Weight Daddy's coming in saying, hey, Matt, I'm concentrating on improving my grip strength more. Very good. My PR is 80 pounds for 8 to 10 seconds using a 2-inch dowel handle. Any ideas on stimulating the grip muscles? Very good. So I give this exercise in my book, Overcoming Isometrics, that I give folks, where it's a very simple thing. You're going to make a fist, you're going to clench it, and you're going to flex it. And that's going to engage your forearm flexors more. And then after about 15 seconds or so of that, you open up your hand, open nice and wide, and now you're engaging your extensors more. And this is just getting your forearms more engaged to make sure, because remember, you can only work a muscle to the degree you can engage it. So if just practicing that, warming up with it maybe a little bit before your grip training will do wonders for you. The second thing I would say, Michael, is yes, you are working on your grip strength. Yes, you are using your forearms and stuff when you're grabbing the dowel and stuff. Very impressive, by the way, 80 pounds. But remember that you still want to treat these exercises as full body exercises. Don't isolate, integrate, right? So even though your forearms are going crazy, make sure you're tensing your biceps and your triceps. Make sure your shoulders are packed and locked in. Make sure your back is engaged. Make sure your glutes and your hamstrings and your core is braced. All these other things. Use your body as a cohesive unit, because fatigue will filter throughout the entire body if there's a weak link somewhere. And even though your forearms may be strong as all get out, you're still going to be inhibited if you're not stabilizing yourself very well in your legs or your back and things like that. Make sure you're engaging your whole body when you're doing that. And you're going to find through the process of irradiation, which we also talk about with Isometrics a lot, that your grip strength is going to be a lot stronger. Dominic, it's good to see you, my friend. Thanks for coming on in. Hey, Matt, if near muscle failure on the inverted rows, is it better to no longer go full range of motion and stay at the same intensity, or to reduce the intensity, step back and maintain full range of motion? Oh, this is such a good question. Fantastic. So that's the other point I forgot to mention about going to failure, is that always remember that failure is very subjective. It's a very subjective thing, because what it really means when we're lifting to failure is we're lifting to the point where we have enough fatigue in the muscle that we can no longer generate a given amount of tension in the muscle. Okay, so for example, right, we got our Isomax. This is a great way to understand how failure works. And I set it for, let's say, 100 pounds, and I'm doing an isometric curl. And the Isomax is designed so that as long as I'm generating enough tension in my muscles to produce enough force on the handle, I will get the telltale beeps, right? Beep, beep, beep. And as soon as my muscles are reaching a point of fatigue that they can no longer generate enough tension to produce that much force, you'll lose the beeps. And that's one of the great things about the Isomax, is it gives you the ability to go to failure on isometrics. Now, you're still able to keep applying force on the handle though. You're still able to work the muscle. You just can't produce that much tension. And that's exactly what you're talking about here. When you're doing your rows and you can't quite get high enough, that's literally because you can't produce enough tension in the muscle to get to the higher level where the resistance on the muscle is higher. So you're using shorter range of motion because you can produce at least that much tension, right? So if you backed up, you'd be doing the same thing where you would get full range of motion, but because you were at an angle, you're taking weight off of your hands. So again, you can keep doing the exercise. You're just not producing as much tension. And that's literally what going to failure is you just no longer have the ability to produce a certain amount of tension. It has nothing to do with your ability to actually do an exercise. It's just producing that much tension. If you stopped for a second and shook out and then just jump right back on, you're like, oh, now I can go. It's like, yeah, you recovered a little bit. So you can produce that much tension again for a little bit while. And there's all kinds of different approaches. What you're talking about here is you've got, shorter range of motion, or you're reducing the resistance. It's effectively a drop set. Same thing as if you were lifting lighter weights. Or if you did pause, rest, or style training where you stop, shake out a little bit and keep going for a couple more repetitions. All it is just saying, I need to just keep going either with the same amount of tension or just a little bit less tension. So let me make it easier on myself. That's another reason why failure, quote unquote, is so subjective, is because it just means that you don't have the ability to produce quite that much tension at that time. That's all it is. That's all it is. So what you're doing here is you're finding ways to keep going. And there's lots of ways you can do it. They all basically fundamentally do the same thing. And again, it would boil down to, well, do you need energy to keep going for subsequent sets? Or can you just burn it out and make your muscles really nice and toasty and then call it a day? That's really what I would base that off of. Because if you are saying, oh, I want to keep doing more sets and things like that, then yeah, it's keep the, I would say when you're starting to lose that range of motion or whatever, just stop the set. And then maybe towards the last set or two, then you could do like the drop sets and stuff. Cristobal, hey. Hey, Matt, have you ever tried strongman lifts like stone carrying, farmer walks, etc.? Do you have them? Good choice for overall fitness. I got a lot into carrying rocks and logs and flipping tires and stuff like that back in the day when I was really following a lot with my older mentor, Zach Evanesh. I had his book on stone training and everything like that. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. I really always liked working with implements that you can just kind of wrap your arms around kind of stuff. It's a lot of enjoyment with that. And it's a great way also, again, to learn that tension irradiation. Because if you're doing like a farmer's carry and you've got 150 pounds in each hand or something, you're not going to do that if your legs aren't very strong. If your shoulders are not stable, you're going to be wobbling all over the place kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun. The funny thing about it that I found is that it was something I got into because I'm always looking for simple and efficient ways to do fitness. And I was like, oh, that certainly sounds very simple and efficient. It's just rocks and logs and all this stuff. But man, oh man, did that take up a lot of time and energy and a lot of equipment in my garage and stuff because of all these different implements and toys and stuff. It's something that I think is, again, a little bit more specific to what you're looking for. You can get very similar results 100 other different ways. It's not like it's going to confer any sort of new thing that you're not going to get otherwise. And again, a lot of times when it comes to different modalities, I usually find that most people are better off selecting just a couple of basic movements from a modality, and that's probably going to give them everything they want from it. So like kettlebells, for example. There are some people out there who are kettlebell fanatics and they got kettlebell tattoos and all this stuff, and they'll do everything with a kettlebell. When the fact of the matter is that most people are probably better off just doing a basic swing, a snatch, and a clean and press. And that's most of everything what people are going to need to get out of a kettlebell training. It's like, what about curls? They're probably going to be better off with dumbbells or suspension stuff. Same thing with calisthenics, push-ups, dips, pull-ups, progressive leg training. That's usually most of what people are going to need to get out of it. So sure, I can create a lot of different unusual things, but it's probably not going to really move the needle all that much for you. And the same thing with strongman training. Get a log, clean and press, a couple farmer carries, maybe have a big stone that you carry across a field. There you go. That's usually going to be most of what you would need to get out of it. Roberto is saying, do you think pull-ups sets of 5 reps, which is my max, can trigger hypertrophy, or should I focus on grease the groove method for some time to increase reps? You're going to have the same stimulus either way, my friend. If you're doing reps to the point where your muscles are getting fatigued, it doesn't matter how you do them. You could do grease the groove, you could do 5, you could do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. As long as you're getting to the point where you're getting a good pump and you're feeling that good fatigue in the muscle, then you're getting basically the same stimulus. Or if you did like 1 rep now, 1 rep, 1 rep, 1 rep, eventually you're going to still get to the same point where your muscles are going to be burning, you're going to have a pump, and you're going to get there. Generally, though, you're going to take a lot more time to get there from grease the groove. Usually what I would recommend if you're trying to go for hypertrophy is, yeah, good. Okay, 5 reps, that's the max. So consider the regular pull-up like your heavy weight, and then also use other types of pull-ups with the regression in your technique. So you can play with 10 repetitions, 15 repetitions, faster repetitions, slower repetitions, things like that. I'm always telling people the seated pull-up with the feet on the ground and stuff, that is a type of pull-up that most people should be doing. I go into gyms and stuff, and well, honestly, whoever watches someone do pull-ups these days, very few people ever do. But even the people who are doing pull-ups, you go into the average gym, and those people, in my opinion, most folks have no business doing pull-ups. They're all hunched up. They have no stability in the shoulders, which is why their elbows always hurt. They're kicking their legs out. They're getting a tiny fraction of a range of motion. In those cases, I would be like, all right, dude, let's get your feet on the floor and get some real good pull-ups, the technique, and that's going to get you much more. I'm not saying that's your case, Roberto. I'm just saying don't just stick with that type of pull-up. Don't get caught in the calisthenics rut, as I would like to say. So rule number 1 of a good routine is, again, you got to stick to it. If you have trouble sticking to a routine, the harder it is for you to stick to a plan, the worse it is, full stop. And you got to make changes, because without that, you got nothing. Okay? So we got our stability. Second is it pointing you in the right direction? So a lot of these questions that we're fielding today are basically along those lines of, if I do X, am I kind of headed in the right direction? And that depends on what kind of stimulus that you're trying to create in your workouts. So earlier we were talking about stimulating hypertrophy versus building skills. Now, if you were saying, I want to work on my handstand, the skill of the freestanding handstand, and you were doing that for, let's say, 30 minutes, and you were getting better at the handstand, you were focusing on gripping the floor and stability in your shoulders and keeping your glutes and your abs tense and all that sort of thing. Great. And you're getting better at handstands. That's a great routine if you want to get better at handstands. But your goal is hypertrophy in the shoulders and your triceps, no, you're not pointing in the right direction now. You're going after a different goal. So you want to instead, I would say, let's get you practicing a couple handstands just so you can practice that a little bit, but that's more of a warm-up. Okay, now we're going to get some pike push-up style stuff. So you can get some big range of motion and get your shoulders really moving and getting those triceps engaged and really burning it out. We'll practice that for strength, nice and heavy reps, like a grind style. We'll go 3 to 5 repetitions, and we'll just do that for as many sets as we can get before you start to peter out a little bit. And then we'll go with maybe like, again, a handstand isometric against the wall. And we'll just do that until you feel like you're not able to hold the handstand anymore. So that's what we're looking at, is, are you pointing in the right direction? This is one of the reasons why I never liked following other people's workout plans. I had a very, well, not a very, but I had about a year, 18-month long stint in like back when CrossFit was really big. And that was one of the biggest reasons why I eventually just kind of put it to the back burner. It's like, yeah, I want to build muscle and strength. That's my primary goal. They're like, great, we're going to do pull-ups today. I'm like, awesome. And we're going to run a mile. I'm like, I don't want to run a mile. That's nothing to do with what I want. And we're going to be doing, burpees. Why? Well, how do you, and I know it's like general physical preparedness. It's like, I don't want general physical preparedness. I don't want a grab bag of results. I don't want a little bit of everything. I want this one thing here. What about cardio? Fine, I'll get that on my mountain bike. I'll get that in the free sparring ring, whatever. I don't need to do that while I'm focusing in my workouts, right? So that was one of the big frustrations I always had, was I was always doing workouts that were pointing me in the wrong direction, going in directions and going towards objectives I had no interest in. So that's one of the things that people often mistakenly do with their routines, is they assume that if the workout's kicking my ass, or if it's really hard, or it's leaving me really tired, then it's got to be doing something. And that's under the old adage that hard work always pays off, but it doesn't. Very frequently, it does not. If you don't know more specifically about what you want, aka what direction you need to point yourself in, and you're not applying the type of efforts to go specifically in that direction, you're just wandering all over the place and you're doing twice the work for half the results. If you're even getting results at all. So are you pointing in the right direction? Don't be afraid to say no to exercises. Don't be afraid to say no to various disciplines. There's a lot of hell in the calisthenics world. There's a ton of stuff I don't do. I don't give a damn about muscle ups. I don't care at all about a front lever or a planche or anything like that. Why? Because it doesn't point me in the direction I want to go in. Now, if it's the direction you want to go in, great. Definitely focus on that. But if it's not going to get you in the direction you want to go in, then kick it to the curb, because every ounce of energy and effort and time you spend on something that's not in alignment with your goals is energy and time and effort you are literally stealing away from your ability to get what you want. You don't have infinite resources. You don't have infinite time and energy and all that stuff. So every second and every bit of energy you put towards an exercise that has nothing to do with what you want, you are losing ground in the direction you do want to go into. You can't go in two directions at once. I'm going to start heading west. Well, if you want to go east, you're now going the wrong way. And it's worse than a waste of time. It's actually leading you away from what you want. And that's, of course, if you are clear and specific with what you do want. CrossFit is, and all the orange fitnesses and stuff like that. That's great. The number of times that I've trained people and I'm like, what do you want? I'm like, I just want to be fit. I just want to be in shape. What does that mean specifically? I don't know. I just want to be in shape. That's what that's great for. People who are literally like, I just want some more fitness thing, sort of, I don't know. Yeah, just stuff. Great. Yeah. And in that case, you don't need to really care about your routine very much, because you're literally saying, just give me whatever. I don't care what I get, just give me whatever. And it just boils down to, what can you maintain? What can you keep doing on a regular basis? But if you don't care what your results are, then don't worry about your routine. Just go after doing whatever. Just have a grab bag and have fun with it. And for a lot of people, that's all they really need. And that's perfectly fine. Cristobal is saying, hey, Matt, what training splits fits better for you? Well, again, I don't have a routine that I follow, so I don't have a split. Sometimes I'll do full body. Sometimes I'll just do push. Sometimes I'll just do pull. Sometimes I'll just work on, shoulders. Sometimes I'll do my legs and my arms. I don't have a split. I don't have any sort of structure in my routines. So, it's all been adaptive. That's not something I need. Again, just get the work in. It doesn't matter so much if you have it in a split or a full body or whatever. Training my legs today, great. Does it matter if it's a part of a split or a full body? No, it's just I'm training my legs. If you throw a rock through a window, does it matter if you also do jumping jacks at the same time? No, you're throwing a rock through the window. You're getting the same result, regardless of whether or not you're mixing it up with other things or you're doing it with something else. It's just get the work in. As long as you can get the work in, again, rule number one of a good routine, then you're going to get the same result. Problem Misfit is coming on saying Happy New Year. Good to see you again. I'm focused on building muscle with push and pull, but for pulling, I'm wondering where to program one arm rows as I am doing double arm rows and seated pull-ups. Yeah, so you can just mix interchangeably if you like with your rows. So remember, when it comes to progression with calisthenics, right? Progressive calisthenics theory, we've got lots of different ways that you can add resistance to your exercises. And with rows, for example, there's a couple different ways you can do that. So if you are on a set of suspension straps, like my NOS ones here, and you're at an angle, like 45 degrees, 2 arm rows, and then you get down lower, you're adding weight to your hands. So that's adding resistance. Now, if you have one arm, so now instead of shifting weight between your hands and your feet, now you're shifting it between your right and your left side. So I go and I put all my weight on my left arm, but I bring my body back up. Fundamentally, you're basically just taking it from one area and put it in another. You're increasing the difficulty in one place and increasing another. So I love one arm rows. I think they're fantastic exercise, but chances are very good it's going to be the same thing as long as your resistance is relatively the same. If it's like, well, I got 10 one arm rows and I usually do 10 regular rows when my body's completely flat against, parallel to the ground. Yeah, it's the same thing. It's not going to change it at all. You're just changing the flavor of the exercise. So in that regard, I always tell people just mix interchangeably, or use the one arm rows as a progression for when you want to go heavier on your rows. So you could be doing rows with 2 arms. You're all the way down. Maybe your feet are even up on something like I could get 30 of these, no problem. Okay, great. Let's make it heavier. Let's go with the one arm version then, so that we're focusing more on building the strength aspect of things. So that is a way that you can implement your single arm rows. But if you're getting roughly the same number of reps, you're basically doing the same thing. You just interchange it however you like. Zaid is coming on back on saying, Matt, being sore after my push day, I felt some issues while doing my front lever on pull. Is it normal to feel your chest engage when doing levers? Yeah, levers engage everything. Yeah, it's not too unusual because remember that your chest does play a role in shoulder extension to some degree. When back in the bodybuilding days and you'd have the dumbbell and you'd be arching on the bench and you'd be doing these pullover kind of things, that was a lat exercise. But sometimes you'd also see that classified as a chest exercise because your pectorals are responsible to some degree for that extension. So that makes sense. Yeah. Particularly maybe a bit in the pec minor if you're really packing down your shoulders aggressively with that. So that makes sense. Yep. Joseph, it's good to see you again. He's saying, Matt, if I use isometrics before a set of rows, would that pre-exhaust the muscle, can it keep reps low, looking for better muscle engagement in my back workout? So again, my friends, this is about managing our fatigue. So one of the things about programming that you're looking at is just managing fatigue in your muscles. Sometimes you want to embrace fatigue and go after it. If you're challenging your stamina and endurance, you're trying to stimulate hypertrophy, all those types of objectives, then you want to create fatigue and you want to embrace it. But if you're working on skill, proficiency, strength, which strength is a skill technically, basically saying how well can I do this thing, then you kind of want to keep fatigue a little bit at bay. So that depends on what you want. Again, what direction are you pointing yourself in? If you have an objective where you've got to get practice in and fatigue is the enemy, then exhausting yourself with some isometrics first is going to hurt your results because you just can't do as well because your muscles are toast. But if you're like, I want to really just smoke the hell out of my muscles and work on the endurance and try to stimulate some hypertrophy, plus I don't have a whole heck of a lot of time, I got to make my back work really hard in like 5-10 minutes, then yeah, you do want that. Exactly. So it's all about using the different tools towards what you want. And that just boils down to how you're using the isometrics. If you go for shorter periods of time, you're not going to create as much fatigue. If you go for longer periods of time, you are. I was doing some isometric pull downs and rows the other day, and I was going with a Tabata format, so 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, 2, maybe 3 sets and stuff. And then just out of curiosity, I was like, I wonder what pull-ups would feel like right now. And I think I got like 2. I got on the bars and I was like, oh dear, sweet. Oh my goodness. Dude, because my muscles were shot. They were fried from doing the isometrics for a few hard, good, long sets, basically just turning the screws to the muscle as fast as I could to bring them to be fatigued. So it depends on how you do the isometrics. If you're just engaging things, yeah, hold it for 1, 2, 3, and you're done. 1, 2, 3, and you're done. You don't even have to go full max too. That was one of the points that I made in my isometrics video the other day, was you don't have to max out on isometrics all the time. You can, but a lot of times you're going to find that you're better off using like 80% effort from the isometrics. Partially if you want to save your energy a little bit, if you want to have some stamina. And a lot of times you're going to have a more of a proficient technique if you're not going maxed out as well. So it depends on how you use the isometrics. You don't necessarily need to max those suckers out. Just wake them up a little bit. And then you start to feel the muscles getting warm and the engagement's pretty good. Good. Then you go into the dynamic stuff. That's why we use isometrics as part of our warm-up with the grind style calisthenics method. Vin Trans, good to see you. How do you accommodate exercises for someone with slightly bowed legs or variation in bone structure? Isn't everyone slightly different? Yes, absolutely. Everyone is different, but a lot of times we overestimate how these differences are going to influence the exercises. It's going to be something that's changing around things. It does have an influence, but unless you have a body or a body shape or type that is pretty far on the bell curve one way or the other, it's not really going to matter that much. A lot of times people will say, oh, I've got longer femurs, therefore I can't do a deep squat. I would bet money that it's not your femurs. it's your glute activation and your mobility, because that's what holds everyone else back. Very rarely is something like that going to hit. Looking at things like your bow-legged and stuff, it's like, well, why are you bow-legged? Is it structural or is it habitual? Most of the time it's habitual. A lot of times when clients are telling me, they're like, oh, this is what I naturally do. This is how I naturally use my shoulders during push-ups. This is how I naturally do it. And it's like, no, you don't naturally do it. You habitually do it that way. At some point in your life, you started using your legs and your hips a certain way, and you've done it so long subconsciously that you're doing it without thought, which makes it feel natural, but it's not natural. It's habitual. That's the power of habit. And things like being bow-legged or pigeon-toed, and I've got my right leg for the longest time has always been pointing my toes slightly outwards. And I was like that literally since the day I was born. I can even call up the doctors when I was young, and I was like, why is my foot like this? Well, you had to be in a cast for the first several months of your life and stuff. So I could make every excuse in the world of this is how my body is. But no, I was like, no, I need to use my body better. It's going to create misalignment and stuff when I'm on the bike. It's going to cause me knee pain. So it's taken me years to correct that. And I'm pretty corrected now. It's pretty much all gone. But it wasn't natural. It was habitual. So a lot of times, again, those variations in body size and shape and stuff, unless you're really extreme on one side or the other, then it's more of a conditioning thing. It's not the body type sort of aspect of things. That's one of the great things about calisthenics, is that you just do it the way you can with your body. You just do to your ability. Sometimes people will say, well, I'm got this body, I can't do this, I can't do that, or I'm going to have okay, fine, whatever. Just keep doing it and keep trying to get better at it. Most of the time, our genetic body size with a lot of stuff isn't going to be quite the limiting factor we think it is. It's good to see you again. Hey, Matt, what do you think about the latest research that shows that we can grow areas of our brain and willpower by getting moving when we don't want to move? How to add that to my training? The brain is always plastic, my friend. There's always areas that are going to be developed whenever we are doing something that is a novel stimulus. Our bodies change because we expose it to a bit of a novel stimulus. Brain's the same way. If you're learning a new language, if you're taking up a new hobby, you've got to focus and concentrate in new and interesting ways. Then, yeah, of course, your brain's going to adapt and stuff and doing hard things. But this sort of thing, sometimes it gets really warped and twisted through the media, because most people are never exposed to any scientific research when it comes to fitness. They're exposed to media supposedly reporting on research, but by the time that information goes through the filter of Instagram and TikTok and podcasts and everything like that, you're not getting actually what the research actually said. You're getting the opinion of whatever host is giving you the information. So by getting moving when we don't want to move. Well, to that, again, in my latest book, I talk a lot about the factions of human motivation. And I'm not at all a fan of this idea that you should force yourself to do things you don't want to do. Okay. I'll just say that, the whole like, oh, you got to be disciplined, you got to force yourself, for several reasons. One is, a lot of times there's damn good reasons you shouldn't be doing it. Okay. If there's a really strong pull within you saying, I really don't want to do this, listen to that. Chances are very good there's good reason you shouldn't be doing it. Right? I get that flack a whole heck of a lot, where sometimes people will say, well, people don't want to do this exercise, or they don't want to do this type of training or whatever because it's really hard. Yeah, that's a damn good reason not to do it, because all that means is that the price of doing it is really high. If you walked into a store and they were selling candy bars for $1,000, and you're like, no, I'm not going to buy a candy bar for $1,000. That's too expensive. It's like, oh, people are wimps. People are weak. They don't want to spend it. That kind of, you're like, yeah, I don't want to buy a candy bar for $1,000. That's stupid. And it's the exact same thing with diet and exercise. When there's something really hard that we consistently don't want to do, we have to explore why that is. Forcing yourself to do things like that is ridiculously dumb. I'll just say it right out. Now, of course, yes, sometimes there's times where it's like, I'm not really feeling like doing this, but at the same time, that's not entirely true. A couple of weeks ago, no, actually, it was more like a month ago or so, I was out late at night. I was drinking with my buddies, and I woke up the next day and I got on the couch and I was like, oh my gosh, I am just so wiped right now. I'm so tired. I'm so exhausted. I'm just not feeling good. And like, but I know if I can just get on my mountain bike and just get the blood flowing, then I'm going to be better. I just know that about me. And of course, what did I do? I went riding my mountain bike. Did I have to say, you've got to do something you don't want to do? No, because of course I wanted to do it. I got on my mountain bike because I wanted to ride my bike. Now, yes, there was a part of me that didn't want to do it. There was a part of me that wanted to be on the couch. Human motivation is not an all or nothing thing. It's never black and white of, I definitely don't want to do this, or I definitely do. There's always a part of you that's going to say, yeah, but do I really want to do this? You get a booty call from your crush or whatever at like 11 at night. And no matter how motivated you are to drive right over to their house, there's still a little bit in the back of your mind going, yeah, but I need a good night's sleep. Now, it might be like 1.0001% of your motivation saying stay home, but it's always going to be there. There's always going to be a part of you that doesn't want to do the thing, but there's also going to be a part of you that does. And your actions will entirely depend on which one is bigger. So when we're looking at this sort of thing and saying, doing things that you don't want to do, well, that's always going to happen. That's always going to be the case. I mean, these podcasts are the highlight of my week. This is the fastest hour of my entire week. I love doing this. But is there a little bit part of me that's like, dude, it's a Saturday afternoon. Why don't we just take the week off and not do this and play video games or whatever? It's like, yeah, there's a part of me that's doing that. So is my brain going to change and get bigger and stuff because I'm doing this podcast? Well, probably not, because it's not a novel stimulus. It's nothing new. But when I started doing it, probably was, just because it was new. It was different. But I know I'm starting to ramble here. But if there's a good reason, if you really don't want to be doing something in your routine, explore that, because chances are very good there's a reason you shouldn't be doing it. Joseph Bellows back again saying, Matt, looking for muscle growth to keep my workouts time low. If I do isometrics before my leg exercises with weight, can using less weight, not as heavy weights. Oh yeah, so remember, this is like the drop sets I was talking to you about before. When you're doing the isometric and you are burning yourself out quickly and you are trying to fatigue the muscle faster with the isometric, then you do something dynamic with the weights. Yeah, you're not going to need nearly as much weight. You're not going to need nearly as many repetitions because you're already using up a lot of the muscular energy with the isometrics. And then when you go into your dynamic training, you're going to need a lot less to be able to keep training things. Smart play. Destroying bars is good to see you again. Love your avatar. Hey, Matt, what do you think of high reps calisthenics training method where you do like 500 reps in total using push-ups, pull-ups, dips, etc.? It's not mentioned much, but I find it very effective. For what? Always we have to ask again, what direction are we headed in? Okay, everything you do will always be effective. Don't get too lost in drinking your own Kool-Aid kind of thing. I find this happens a heck of a lot where people will get on a program or they'll start doing something a certain way. And of course, adaptation is always specific to what we give it, which means we're going to get better at whatever we're doing. If you're doing high rep calisthenics, you're going to get better at high rep calisthenics. If you're doing 1,000 burpees, you're going to get better at doing 1,000 burpees. If you try doing one-arm push-ups with a weight vest, you're going to get stronger one-arm push-ups with a weight vest. So if you are judging the effectiveness of what you're doing on your ability to do the thing, then it's always going to work. Your program will always be 100% effective. But we want to be more specific about what we're actually trying to do. Now, if your goal is to do high rep calisthenics, then great. Then why are you asking me? You're obviously getting what you want out of it, because if you do high rep calisthenics, you're going to get better at high rep calisthenics. There you go. My opinion is moot. It doesn't matter because you're going to get better at whatever you do. But when it comes to other types of objectives like building muscle and strength and that sort of thing, I'm generally not about that type of volume, because usually what that means is you're lifting light. You're doing lifting light. It's like going into a gym and just lifting an empty barbell 100 times. It's like doing that sort of thing. That's fundamentally what it is. High rep training is light lifting. You're lifting light weight. You're using light resistance, which can be effective again at building up some of the endurance, the stamina. You're potentially working on technique because you're getting a lot of volume in if you're still working on technique, or your technique could be going to crap because a lot of times we will compromise technique for the sake of repetitions, especially if we're rep chasing, that sort of thing. But with adaptive training, I never tell people how many reps and sets they should do because that's irrelevant. Instead, you want to achieve the objective of your training, and then you do however many reps and sets you want or can do to achieve that objective. Because remember, so many of the messages in our fitness culture will say that your results depend on how much work you do. And that's like back in high school where my teachers would always say, okay, write this report. It needs to be 5 pages long. And I was like, okay, I guess a good report is 5 pages long. If it's 3 pages long, it's a bad report, kind of thing. Until my English teacher, who was very, very smart, she's like, I don't care how long this report is. You have to make it as long as it needs to be a good report. And she's like, do it in 1 page. If you could do it in 1 page, she's like, I'll give you an A right on the spot, because it better be a damn good report to be, convey all that information she wanted in 1 page. I think one guy one time did it in 1.5 pages. She's like, actually, that was pretty damn good, A+. And someone else, was long-winded and they're flabbergasted and they turned in like this huge stack of paper, and she's like, failed. You didn't understand the assignment. It was way too long, kind of thing. It's the same thing with fitness. Your results don't come from how hard you're working. They don't come from how many sets and reps you do. They come from how well you're achieving your objective. And a lot of times when we make a lot of work the objective, we compromise our ability to hit a fundamental objective, unless the objective is to actually just do the amount of work, in which case I would say, why, kind of thing. But that's my opinion on it. It's like, it's not good or bad, but a lot of times I find it's very wasteful for most people because they can achieve the objective they want with half the work if they add some intensity to it. So contrary to that, Dan saying, I'm also interested in high rep calisthenics. I've never really gotten any major results from low rep worth exploring. So again, what are the results you're looking for? You're going to get the results for what you're doing all the time. Exercise is always 100% effective because every type of training and every form of exercise does exactly the same thing. It gets your body to be able to do the thing you're asking it to do. If you want to get better at low rep training, you're going to do low rep training. If you want to get better at high rep training, you're going to get better. Your body does not give a hoot about how it looks. There's no such thing as an aesthetic demand to exercise directly. It's all a correlation sort of thing. And I'm assuming that's what we're talking about here when it comes to the results that you guys are experiencing. Because the results are always going to be 100% effective if your result is, I just want to be able to do the thing, in which case you're always going to be effective, because that's fundamentally what exercise is. When you're on the pull-up bar and you're trying to do 100 pull-ups, that's what your body understands. It doesn't understand, I'm trying to get bigger lats or bigger biceps. It says, I'm trying to be able to do 100 pull-ups. That's fundamentally what exercise does. And so when we're looking at the result that we want, always remember that your body's first and foremost objective is, I want to be able to do the thing you're asking me to do. And that's all exercise ever is. Everything else is a side effect from that sort of training. And a lot of times when it comes to like the aesthetic augmentation of the body, generally I find that unless you're doing something extreme, where you're on one end of the bell curve, generally as long as you're just pushing yourself, you're going to get the same results regardless of what you're doing. High rep, low rep, high volume, lower volume, training 3 times a week, training every single day. Your results are, for the physiological augmentation, are going to be about the same at the end of the day after years of training either way. And this is just something that a lot of times people will, especially if you've done a lot of different things, like I've done free weights, I've done bands, I've done calisthenics, I've done isometrics and stuff. Does my body really look a whole heck of a lot different with any of it? No, of course not. Why? Because I'm doing the same thing with all of them. I'm still engaging my muscles to a high degree and burning them out with everything. So it really doesn't matter. I've done high volume, I've done low volume, I've done fast reps, I've done slow reps. Did any of it really matter? No, not really. Why would it? It wouldn't. It shouldn't make a difference, because fundamentally I was doing the same thing with all the methods. And it's the same thing that happens with all your types of training. If you're still just getting your muscles to a point where they're getting a good pump and they're burning out a bit, it doesn't matter how you're getting there. You're still creating the same stimulus. But again, a lot of times we get caught into thinking that the type of work that we do or the amount of work we do matters. And then when we make the work the goal, then we're no longer going after a fundamental stimulus. And in that case, you're just down to blind luck. Vin is saying, have you ever tried blood flow restriction training to improve strength, mass gains? Is it more suited to rehab rather than healthy individual? I've never really tried it. The fact that it isn't a big thing right now makes me somewhat skeptical of it, because it was really popular in the media for a while. I know various companies were coming out with blood flow restriction cuffs that you could be using and stuff. And it was supposed to be like the latest and greatest thing. And it just, you don't hear about it anymore too much. It might be in little pockets here and there. But again, it's generally one of those things that if it's so great, then it would be everywhere. It would be awesome. And people would be like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. But the fact that it hasn't grown to be a big thing makes me somewhat skeptical of it. And like I keep saying, it could be just a different way of fundamentally doing the same thing. We're burning out the muscle. We're creating a high degree of fatigue. There's a lot of metabolic waste product building up. There's muscle damage and stuff. Yeah, you do that with any kind of training where you're really pushing your muscles. So if fundamentally you're doing the same thing, and that's usually what happens with all the different routines out there, all the different variations, there's a lot of different ways that we can do things, but fundamentally, on the fundamental level, you're always doing the same thing, which means you're always going to have the same results. And at that point, it just basically boils down to, well, just do whatever you want. Literally pick things based on pure personal preference. And I do calisthenics and isometric training. Why? I like it. Does it have any big, huge advantages for my ability to condition my muscles? Not really, because fundamentally I'm doing the same thing as lifting weights or using machines or using bands or Bowflex or whatever. Right? If I'm fundamentally doing the same thing, then it really doesn't matter what I'm doing. So in that case, I'll just do whatever the hell I want, because how you feel about what you're doing is a very big influence on your success. If you're using a particular tool and you mentally and emotionally don't really feel that great using it, then your ability to push yourself and your ability to stay stable and consistently do it and be able to achieve your objective is going to be compromised. And then if you find something you do like, then it's going to be better. And then mistakenly, we think, well, that means that that's a better method. No, it's not. It's because of you. It's because you have a preference in one way or the other. There's nothing special about calisthenics. I'm still just doing bicep curls, still just making my biceps work against resistance. It's no different on a fundamental level, but it's different on an emotional level. And that's why it's better for me. But so what? Let's get to the last questions here, wrapping things up. Redovin, good to see you. Hey, man, I want to ask, what do you think about training with chest expanders like the old school bodybuilders used to do? They're rear fly machines, basically. You could do the same thing on suspension straps or just bands. This motion is great. We all could use some more scapular retraction and depression. Zach Evanish used to always, I'm probably sure he does it now. He would give his athletes workouts and you'd have the bands, just little bands around the gym. And someone was like taking some time after a heavy lift or something. He's like, okay, more of these. And you get 20. Just get 20, get to 20. Because we all could use more back activation, my friends. Most of us have terrible posture these days. We're all members of the kyphotic army. It's not going to be pretty. And this will compromise everything you're ever doing with your upper body, especially, and even your lower body. So getting that scapular motion is great. And the chest expanders are good for that. But I would say just use a band. It's cheaper and easier. Creative Trust 7 saying, hey, sorry to bother you. You're not bothering me, man. That's why I'm always here for you. I want to offer nope. Spam. Oh my gosh. So bad. So bad. I didn't think we were getting that stuff anymore. I thought we were too small for people to really take notice. Hey, Matt Ben is saying, is trying to maintain your calisthenics level with the holidays, bulk, weight, progressive overload. So I addressed this a little bit in the episode last week, 2 weeks ago. Gosh, how long ago was Christmas and stuff? And yeah, basically the lesson that I really wanted to impart in that is that, yeah, life is going to change and your levels are going to change. The human body is a transient thing, and there's just going to be periods where you're just going to get fatter. And there's going to be periods where you're going to get leaner. There's periods where you're going to be weaker. There's periods where you're going to be stronger. So this whole idea, sometimes we get really in our head about, I want to stay the course, stay on target despite the holidays. Usually that's a recipe for more stress than it's worth. I used to really fret about the holidays. How am I going to get my workouts in? How am I going to stay on my diet? When am I going to be able to get to the gym? If I go on a vacation to my parents' place down in Florida, can I get to the gym? Can I stay on my workout routine? This is a bunch of stuff that really is not worth the effort to expend it. My lesson that I eventually learned was like, yeah, sure, skip your workouts during the holidays and get fatter. Go for it. Why not? Why the hell not? Because in the grand scheme of things, it shouldn't matter. Because temporary changes and disruptions in our workouts and our diet, they're not going to matter. They're too small of an influence. Now, as my father once rightfully observed, he's like, nobody gets a break though. He's like, okay, so we've got Halloween, so you got a lot of candy. Then you've got Thanksgiving, so you've got Thanksgiving dinner. Then you got the holidays, you got holiday parties, and you got drinking, and you got eating. And then you've got the weekenders coming up, and we've got the playoffs during the football. And I go to my friend's house for every Sunday. I mean, literally, there was a Sunday several weeks ago, and we all were like watching the late game, the football game. And I was like, oh my God. And they're like, what? And I'm like, we've literally been sitting on this couch, eating chips and junk food and drinking beer for 13 straight hours. And they were like, oh my God, you're right. I'm like, yeah. Now, if we did that every week, that would be a problem, because that's a continuous influence. That's pointing the rocket in the direction we don't want to go in, right? But I only did it that one time, right? So does it really matter? No. Is it really going to be much of an influence? No, no. So I don't worry about it. We want to look at the trends. We want to look at the habitual things we do on a regular basis. And if the holidays are exposing habits that are sticking with you mostly through the year, then you've got a problem. But if you get a little fatter and a little weaker and you skip workouts for a couple of weeks and then you get back to the gym and you get on that pull-up bar and you're like, oh boy, these are harder than I remember. Okay, fine, sure. So what? I haven't been on my mountain bike in nearly 2 months. That next time I'm on the mountain bike, that's going to be a hard ride. Does it matter? Nope. Because I'm just going to get back into regular riding. I'm going to be right back to where I was and where I've always been within a week or two. So you're always ebbing and flowing. And if anything is going to make your life a miserable hell, is trying to stay at one particular level all the time. Destroying Bars back said, well said. I wanted to ask if you recommend high reps method for building muscle in general. Do you find the volume up to 1,000 reps too excessive for building muscle? It might be. For me, I find a lot of times the amount of volume you should be doing for stimulating hypertrophy really depends a lot on the individual. Because some people will thrive on higher volume. Some people will be much worse off with higher volume. So again, it's not the volume that matters. It's whether or not you're achieving the objective of your training. And for hypertrophy, we're trying to achieve the objective of essentially burning out and really working the muscle hard. Okay? Some people are going to be a lot better off with low volume, high intensity stuff like the old Mike Metzer programs. Some people are going to be much better off doing the exact opposite and doing 1,000 push-ups a day. Generally, though, those are the extremes, and that's where you're going to have the ends of the bell curve. That's also where you get the most vocal people on social media saying one is great and the other's terrible. No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Do the amount of volume you need in order to best basically cook the muscle, for lack of a better way of putting it. And some people are going to find, I just find it's a lot easier and more comfortable and more satisfying if I do higher volume stuff. Great, do the higher volume stuff. Some people are just going to be like, dude, I can cook my muscle to smithereens in 2 sets. And after that, it's just a slog to get through more. I'm like, well, what are you doing it for? Basically, though, what you're looking for is when you're really working your muscles, though, you're getting to a point of fatigue. So your ability to do the exercise is going to drop precipitously off from that. So let's say pull-ups, for example. And you get on that pull-up bar and you get like 10 and 10 and 10 and 10 and 9 and 8. And then you get on and you're like 4 and your technique's going downhill. Okay, at that point, you're done. Stop. Why do more stuff like that? Because now you're doing a lot more crappy reps and you're building bad habits. You're trying to fatigue the muscle. Working it more under that fatigue probably isn't going to do you a whole heck of a lot of good. And a lot of the research bears this out, where they'll take various groups and they'll say, okay, this group basically pushed themselves to failure or high fatigue with a few straight sets. And this one did like drop sets and stop pause training and all these other things. And a lot of times in those studies, the group that did more work and more volume didn't get better results as long as they still brought their muscles to a similar state of fatigue. Because once it's fatigued, I always say it's like pulling a trigger on a gun. You need a certain amount of pressure to pull that trigger, but once the gun fires, you can keep squeezing it as hard as you can. But why? You've pulled the trigger. You've gotten it done. Why are you still working? And again, this is why we get so addicted to hard work in our fitness culture. We think that the key to success is hard work. And if we put in more, we're going to get more out, which is flat out wrong. Hard work is a liability, my friends. Yes, you need it. Yes, you need to put in a good amount of work. And the more you want to accomplish, the more work it's probably going to take. But always remember, there is a point where hard work is not going to do you any more good. And more work beyond a certain point will actually detract from your results. And for most people, if they're trying to go after, again, an objective of work, chances are very good they're putting in more work than they should be. But if they're going with the low approach, they may be doing less work than need to be. So again, it's don't base your results, don't base your programming on how much work you should be doing. I don't care how much work you do. Your results do not come from how much work you do. I don't care if it's one set to failure or 1,000 reps or whatever. That's not the important thing. The important thing is getting that objective met. And if you need more work to do that, then do more work. But if you can do it in less work, then do it in less work. Because less work is going to be better than a lot more work, because it's always eating up resources. Todd Weber to feed us out here, saying, Matt, been following for years for your extraordinary insight and great content. Thank you very much, Todd. What would you suggest for an isometric only approach to fitness? Well, I don't suggest it to a degree, because movement's always going to be part of what we do as human beings anyway. So I'm always about a multi-faction or multi-modality approach. Like I do isometrics and calisthenics, but you can even break that up. I've got suspension calisthenics and weighted calisthenics and progressive calisthenics, and I'm a martial artist, and I'm a skier, and a mountain biker, and a road biker, and I go hiking, and I went rock climbing the other day. I do lots of different stuff. I don't believe in utilizing any one thing for general fitness in that regard, because nothing's going to be complete in and of itself. Nothing's going to be everything that you need it to be. And it's kind of like saying, I'm going to have a diet of only bologna or only protein shakes. And like, look at the nutritional profile of this protein shake. It's awesome. It's great. It's wonderful. It's like, yeah, but no matter how good that protein shake is, it's never going to be as healthy and beneficial for you as a fully fledged diet with a lot of variety and lots of different food. You just can't possibly get everything you need from one thing. Now, do you want to make isometrics the main cornerstone of like your strength and conditioning? Okay, that's a different story. That's a different story. In which case I would say, yeah, just do, like any other program and stuff, you just swap reps for time. Isometrics, again, fundamentally, we're doing the same thing, folks. It looks different. It may seem different on paper and on videos, but ultimately you're not doing anything different with your muscles. You're still contracting them. It's still time under tension. It's still muscle fatigue. It's still creating a lot of tension for the sake of building strength. It's still creating tension for a good amount of time for the sake of stamina and endurance. It's still utilizing muscle in a synergistic way for coordination and stability. Isometrics is no different, which is why it works. Remember that fundamentally, if something does work, it means it does the same thing as everything else. Right? If it does something radically different, then it's not going to work. Then it's not going to be able to do it, because fundamentally everything works for the same fundamental reasons. If we're contracting our muscles harder, we get stronger. I don't care how you're doing it. I don't care how much work you're doing it. I don't care what your program looks like. Contracting your muscles harder gets you stronger. Contracting your muscles longer makes you better at stamina. Burning your muscle out stimulates hypertrophy, so far as we understand at this point. Being able to utilize things in a coordinated and synergistic way builds coordination and stability and the skills and everything like that. And it doesn't change regardless of what you're utilizing. So use your isometrics just as the same way you do with everything else. Don't make the mistake a lot of people make. I see this a lot with calisthenics, where they will utilize a different modality and totally change up the programming. And again, that means they're pointing their rocket in a different direction. They were doing 5x5 heavy bench press, and then they get into calisthenics and they're like, I'm going to do 1,000 push-ups a day. You totally change where you're going with that. You fundamentally change. If you're doing 5x5 and that's working for you on the bench press, you do 5x5 on the push-ups. Same exact thing. You change the resistance to accommodate it. It doesn't mean you do lightweight. It means that you have the same resistance and the same amount of work that you're doing. You don't want to change up what you're doing on a fundamental level, because then you get different results. And then mistakenly people think, well, this works better or this isn't as effective. It's like, no, you changed what you did fundamentally. If you did the same thing on a fundamental level, you'd still get the same result, regardless of what method you're using. So there we go with workouts and programming, my friends. I hope your training is going very well here in the new year. And I've got some exciting news. I've got a lot more of the remote coaching. I'm working with Al Cavadlo and the company that he's been affiliated with. So I'm going to be posting shortly on my website and Instagram and everything like that, details on how you can take advantage of being able to finally get some official professional remote coaching from me. And that's something I'm very excited to be bringing to you here in the new year. And again, the adaptive training ebook will be coming out probably in next month or so. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming on, asking your questions. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Remember, the audio to this is always rebroadcast on the podcast platform of your choice. And I will see you guys next week. Till then, be fit and live free.